Oh, welcome back. Some international news for you now on eNCA. Over in the UK, the army is on standby to be deployed to London, we understand. Dozens of armed officers have turned in their weapons. Let's go across to UK correspondent Olly Barratt to try and understand what exactly is happening. Hello to you, Olly. Just help me understand who is handing in their weapons and why is there talk of the army responding?
Well, what has happened here, Gareth, is that there is an ongoing case which is being brought against a Metropolitan Police officer here in London. And that Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with murder over the shooting of a man in London towards the end of last year. He was called Chris Kaba. He was shot in a vehicle that police had linked to a gun incident earlier, a day earlier than the shooting took place. Now, because of that murder charge that has been brought against a Metropolitan Police firearms officer, several dozen, we think over 300 actually, armed officers here in the British capital have handed back essentially their weapons permits for a period because they're worried about the implications of this case being brought against one of their colleagues. We're told by the Metropolitan Police that this is as conversations go on about exactly the implications for other serving police officers of the fact that this case is being brought. What really worries some of these firearms officers is that they could make a mistake going about their very dangerous duties, and as a result of making a mistake, that they too could end up being charged with murder or some other crime. So it's that element of caution that has led to these dozens of police officers saying that for now at least they don't want to be carrying a weapon in the British capital as part of their duties. They don't want to be rotated on for armed duties at the moment.
Yeah, Mark Rowley, I see the Metro Police Chief responding over the past few days, saying that they are wanting better legislation and more protection for officers to go about doing their jobs.
Exactly right. That's what he's calling for. Certainly the government appear to have a huge amount of sympathy with all of this as well. We've heard from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today. He's talked about how he believes that it's right to carry out the review that's been launched into all of this by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Both of those two figures have talked about police officers needing to know with full clarity all of the legality questions around what they do when they are armed and when they are involved in potentially difficult operations. So that review is going to be ongoing. One other update to this is that there was, we knew over the weekend that there had been a request made for the armed forces to be on standby should they be needed to fill in any gaps left by those officers that weren't at the moment wanting to be involved in armed duties. Now, earlier today, the Metropolitan Police had to come out and put a statement out and clarify because they thought that there was some misunderstanding about all of this. And the Metropolitan Police were saying, be clear that this is just a standby contingency measure. There are currently no armed officers from the Army or the SAS or the Secret Service being involved in policing operations in London. It's just a contingency were we to need it for a counter-terrorism operation, for example. Well, we've actually just had a further update from the Metropolitan Police saying that as of right now they are standing down that contingency because actually they've got enough officers who are reporting for duty in terms of being armed. Now that represents a shift because what it means is that actually some of those conversations that have been going on behind the scenes have already led to some of these officers taking back their weapons permits and again reporting for duty in the normal way.
All right, so the Army almost just taking a step back in this case. They were a contingency, but now you're hearing from Olly Barratt over in the UK and in London that the situation has changed quite dramatically. But these are only conversations, Olly, as we were talking about the legalities around what a police officer can do while armed on duty has been an ongoing problem for a number of prime ministers, but I suppose now it's come to a head because you're often seeing police being accused of brutality and abusing the privilege of carrying a firearm around. So right now conversations about getting back to the front line today, but it doesn't mean the problem is gone.
No, absolutely. Very difficult questions indeed. I mean, the specific case that has triggered these concerns of Chris Kaba, who, as I say, was shot by a police officer almost exactly a year ago, that triggered protests and huge amounts of questions about police brutality and about how armed officers in the Metropolitan Police go about their duties on a daily basis. Now, the police will point you to statistics in which they say that of the hundreds and hundreds of incidents that involved firearms officers over the course of the last 12 months, only a handful, you can count them on both hands, of incidents actually led to police firing a weapon at an individual, at a person. So the police certainly would like a characterisation of all of this, which is that they operate in a very restrained and responsible manner. But clearly this isolated episode has led to those protests on one side and questions about whether the police acted in the wrong way, but also now real concerns among police officers themselves about whether they have the legal protections in place to be able to go about their job on a daily basis, often in very difficult conditions, with the confidence that it's not going to end up with them in court in some way, facing some kind of case.
Well, Olly Barratt, then, for the moment, thank you very much for joining us from London this afternoon. So that news just in, exactly what Olly and I were talking about. Dozens of Metro police officers, in fact, close to 300, had handed in their gun-carrying permits, as it were, is essentially in protest over the laws of how police who are armed in the UK, the Metro Police, how it is that they're being protected by the law. The Army, it seems, not seeing boots on the ground, but they were a contingency plan only. But while we were on air with Olly, he received that news that it seems like enough of those Metro Police officers in London have now gone back to work, if you will. They've stepped out back into London with their firearms and their firearm permits. But there's still a big issue there about how they're able to do their jobs within the framework of the law over in the UK. We know what a big issue police brutality has been around the world, and London is certainly no exception. Well, I'm sure we'll hear from Olly again in the days to come.